You guys, I have something to tell you that I thought of this morning regarding the leopard in the book of Daniel, in Daniel 7, verse 6. And the history of the leopard represents Alexander the Great's conquest and how quickly and speedily he managed to overcome all of these nations. So it is said in the Bible commentary that the leopard, a predator, is among the fastest of carnivores, and with the addition of 4 wings becomes especially swift. This illustration describes the astounding pace of Alexander's conquest from Greece to Egypt to India in 12 years, from 334 to 323 BC. He subjugated by conquest or voluntary submission the entirety of the Persian Empire and then some. This feat becomes especially astounding when it is known that this period included a 7-month siege of Tyre and 3 years subduing Bactria. Along with his military victories came Greek or Hellenistic culture and language, which later paved the way for the spreading of the gospel throughout the world. When Alexander suddenly died without an heir, his generals divided the empire into 4 primary kingdoms, the 4 heads. Ptolemy took Egypt and nearby lands. Seleucus received Syria, Asia Minor, and the conquered eastern nations. Lysimachus ruled Thrace and surrounding territories, and lastly, Cassander controlled Macedonia and Greece. Thrace was later absorbed by the Seleucid Empire, and Macedonia's power was checked by the rising power of Rome. Thus, both prophecies in Daniel 2 and 7 speak of the same divided empire, the former showing political and military dominance as well as prophetic relevance to the Holy Land, and the latter in the initial governmental situation after Alexander's death. The 4th beast in Daniel 7, the one which struck the most terror in Daniel's heart, is described as devouring the whole earth, trampling it and breaking it in pieces. The whole earth is comprised of 2 words, kol and ara. Considering the basic meaning of these 2 Aramaic words, the whole earth is a correct literal translation. However, this same word combination appears in a number of other places and does not consistently mean the entirety of the globe or even the entirety of the civilized world. The one place where the phrase the whole earth actually does imply the entire planet is Daniel 2:35, where the stone that struck the image, that's going to be pertinent to what I'm going to say, became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. So the king strikes this image. This great mountain represents Jesus Christ's rule on earth, which will certainly be a world-ruling kingdom in the fullest and truest sense of the word. So it's interesting that the King of Kings comes down and strikes this image that was in Nebuchadnezzar's dream of all of these empires that had ruled. So Alexander the Great was prophesied to be the leopard of Greece in the book of Daniel. Why is this super interesting and significant? And the very fact that King Charles' hallmark, his mark that he stamped on the silver cross before his coronation, that contained the 2 slivers of wood from Jesus' true cross, supposedly given to the king by the Pope, and it was carried in the procession at the front of the procession in the coronation ceremony of King Charles III. It's interesting that that was a leopard's head hallmark of the king. The king literally put his mark in the cross. He struck it. Strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered, was a prophecy that happened when Jesus was struck. But this last king that's going to reign struck his mark in the cross of the King of Kings. And that is extremely significant, because I was thinking about the very fact that King Charles III's father, Prince Philip, was related to the Greek royal family. He was a member of the House of Glucksburg, and Philip was a prince of both Greece and Denmark by virtue of his patrilineal descent from George I of Greece and George's father, Christian IX of Denmark. He was from birth in the line of succession to both thrones. And this is extremely significant. So we have King Charles III's father going back to being able to attain the throne of Greece, but he never became king there. Why did Prince Philip renounce his Greek titles? His family left their nation, Greece, after political turmoil broke out in the country. He adopted the family surname Mountbatten when he became a naturalized British subject and renounced his royal titles to marry Princess Elizabeth, who became Queen Elizabeth II. Prince Philip's father was Prince Andrew of Greece and Denmark, and he was the seventh child and fourth son of King George I and Queen Olga of Greece. So how was Prince Philip related to Greece? Philip's father was the fourth son of King George I and Queen Olga of Greece, and his mother was the eldest child of Louis Mountbatten, first Marquis of Milford Haven, and Victoria Mountbatten, Marchioness of Milford Haven, formerly Prince Louis of Battenberg and Princess Victoria of Hesse and by Rhine. Now that's interesting because William and Kate named their youngest son Louis. Prince Philip, he was born as a Greek prince in Greece, son of a prince of Greece that was fighting. Basically, he was doing blunders when he wasn't committing war crimes as a general of the Greek army. His father, Prince Andrew, known as Capsicalavus, burner of huts, Prince Andrew was about to be judged for his actions in the war, but he fled Greece with his baby. Hence, Philip was raised in England. Now, his father, Prince Andrew, was born and raised as a Greek prince. And actually, he was born in the palace there in Greece. But his parents were King George I of Greece and, like I said, Queen Olga Constantinova of the Hellenes. Queen Olga was born and raised in Russia of Russian royalty, but she was also the child of Princess Alexandria of Saxe-Altenburg, who wasn't a Russian. But even from her Russian father's side, she was only partly Russian and partly Prussian, as her grandma was Charlotte of Prussia, born in Berlin. So from his mother, he was Russo-Prussian. George I of Greece was the king, was a son of Christian IX of Denmark, who was the fruit of Friedrich William, who was from Prussia. Philip's mother, Alice, was born a princess of Battenberg in Windsor Castle, England. Her father was Prince Louis of Battenberg, and she was born in Graz, Austrian Empire, while his parents in turn were Alexander of Hesse and Julia of Battenberg. Alice's mother was Victoria of Hesse, born in Windsor Castle too. Princess Alice, Prince Philip's mother of Greece, she is the one that is buried on the Mount of Olives that King Charles, Prince William went to visit her grave up there on the Mount of Olives. And she was from Greece. Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, was born into the Greek and Danish royal families. His family, the Greek royal family, was originally established in Greece in the 19th century when Prince Philip's grandfather, King George I of Greece, a Danish prince, was appointed as the king of Greece. Although Prince Philip's family did not have Greek ancestry in the traditional sense, they were considered the Greek royal family due to their position as the reigning monarchs of Greece. The royal family's lineage and title were based on royal appointments and political decisions rather than direct Greek ancestry. So it's not uncommon for royal families to have members who do not have direct blood ties to the country they rule. It's kind of like the Commonwealth, and the king being king over Commonwealth nations. Throughout history, royal families have often intermarried with other royal families from different countries, leading to a mix of different ancestries within royal lineages. In the case of Prince Philip's family, even though they did not have Greek blood, they were recognized as the royal family of Greece due to their royal titles and positions within the country. So isn't it interesting that King Charles III's hallmark stamp that he struck in the cross of Christ, in the silver of the cross, to show the purity of the cross with the mark of the king, that was struck into the silver containing two slivers of Jesus' cross, the King of Kings, and this earthly king will be the one that Israel accepts as their king to reestablish their throne. He struck the cross, and it is said that it is the first time that a king has put his mark on the cross. So they have that royal connection to Greece, and yet they are truly Danish. And get this, it is said about the Antichrist that he may be from the tribe of Dan. So according to a 15th century Latin chronicle, the Danish, or the Danes, were of the tribe of Dan. The chronicle, called Chronicon Holstetia Vetus, was published in 1698 in Gottfried Leibniz's Accessoires Historiques. In 1620, antiquarian Henry Spellman also claimed that the Danish, or the Danes, were the Israelite tribe of Dan, based on the similarity of their names. So Prince Philip's father was the Prince of Greece and Denmark. The land of Denmark is named after Dan, the forefather of the tribe of Dan. Descendants of Dan settled in Denmark, as shown by biblical and secular sources. So isn't that interesting that the mark of King Charles III was the leopard head? And of course, his royal cipher is his mark, and I talked about that being the mark of the beast. But the leopard's head is what represented Alexander the Great's conquest in the book of Daniel. And here in the last days, Israel will set up the throne, the monarchy again, with the king that has the leopard, the lion, the bear, and the dragon as his emblems. Another Danish source, Vetus Chronicon Hostate, quoted by Sharon Turner, 1768 to 1847, says expressly that the Danes, Jutes, Angles, and Saxons were descendants of Israel. Sven Agesen, circa 1185, said that a mythical King Dan gave his name to the Danes. From the above, we see that the Danes were named after a forefather called Dan, and this person may well be Dan of Israel. The equation of Humble with Jacob and the Danish legend also indicate this. This does not nullify the possibility of the name Dan also having been given to a later king, for several of them who became famous as a leader of this people, the Danes, the Danish. This could also refer to Dan in the northern Galilee or a later settlement further north, such as Luash, northwest Syria of the Dananu of Dan. The Bashan in Aramaic was known as Bethan. And in the geography of Ptolemy, we find in this area the territories of Bethany and the kingdom of Bathania. Scandinavia in the old editions of Pliny is called Scandinavia, land of the Scyths, and Basilia, Pliny, NH 2735, the royal Scythians had been named Basioi. And in addition to this, the Hebrew language Encyclopedia Biblica tells us that ancient Mesopotamian sources refer to the Bashan as Basil, and we could therefore understand an additional meaning of the prophecy of Moses in Deuteronomy 33:22 to be that Dan would use Scandinavia, Basilia, as a springboard to leap from like a lion, and this is what happened. Dan is symbolized by a lion and a serpent and a griffin. Okay? A griffin is what is on the flag of Wales. It's a dragon griffin. And Wales is where they got the silver for the cross that King Charles III, who had the emblem of the lion and the hallmark stamp of the leopard, and his ancestors were the Prince of Greece and Denmark. The coat of arms of Denmark depicts 3 lions. Serpent symbols have been found from Scandinavia, and the term serpent could also refer to a dragon. And the head of a dragon was often carved on the forefront of Viking ships. One of the symbols of Dan was the griffin. Incredible. The griffin is described as a creature partly lion, part eagle. The Hyksos shepherd kings, whom we identify with Israelites and who've been identified as the Danoi founders of Greek Mycenaean civilization, incorporated the Hyperborean griffin as a regal symbol. The griffins were believed to be guardians of the gold in the far north, the country of the Hyperboreans. Hyperboreans were considered to be the dwellers of the British Isles, or of Scandinavia. Some have interpreted the phrase, Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path, in Genesis 49:16, as referring to a tribal trait of leaving their namesake everywhere along the path that they went, just as a snake leaves the trail of its crawling in the dust of the path. Mahana Dan, camp of Dan, in Judges 18:12, Dan by Joppa, Dan in the Galilee, Dananu in the southeast Turkey, Danoi in Greece, and it goes on, Don, Dniester, Dnieper, Danube, Denmark, Dana in Ireland, Danoia, Devon. These are all derivatives of the name Dan. One of the kings, Luash, called himself King of the Danim, in Hebrew, King of the Dans. And Cyprus was conquered by the Daninu of Dan, and the Assyrians referred to it as Yidna, Isle of the Danes. So too we have Denmark, area of Dan, and the Viking area of England, the Danelaw rulership of Dan, and the Danes who called themselves after Dan, their father. The prophetess Deborah describes Dan as a seagoing entity in Judges 6:7. And this was a Phoenician characteristic, and we find Israelites from Dan in Tyre, the Phoenician city. The prophet Ezekiel linked Dan together with Javan, Ionia in West Anatolia or Greece in general, as trading with Phoenician Tyre. And it says in Ezekiel 27:19, Dan also and Javan, going to and fro, occupied in the fairs, bright iron, cassia, and calamus were in thy market. A couple of the elements of the incense from the temple. The Danes of Denmark have always been a maritime nation and are now believed to have reached North America in the Viking era. Now, Antichrist was considered to be from the tribe of Dan, they said. The continued Jewish expectation of a Messiah after Jesus came was interpreted by the Christians in the 2nd century of Christianity as a foreboding of the coming of an Antichrist. Irenaeus, the first writer to refer to a Jewish Antichrist, found support for this foreboding in Jeremiah 8:16 and Revelation 7:5-7, which seemed to indicate that the Antichrist will come from the tribe of Dan. These disturbing notions of the Antichrist were manifestations of the controversy between Jews and Christians over Jesus and the correct interpretation of the Old Testament's messianic prophecies. So that's just a little bit of the history of what it says there, and I will read Jeremiah 8:16. Now this is kind of shocking because when I realized that the white horse rider was King Charles III, because he has a white horse that has a trumpeter that comes out and announces his arrival. And I realized that it's the Sanhedrin that put the king in place, and that they are giving him a crown that the Temple Institute commissioned to give to him when he comes to Jerusalem, plus that Torah scroll that's already been made for him as a gift with the crown. It's interesting that this scripture about Dan in Jeremiah 8:16 says, "The snorting of his horses was heard from Dan. The whole land trembled at the sound of the neighing of his strong ones, for they are come and have devoured the land and all that is in it, the city and those that dwell therein." And part of the reason why they think that the Antichrist comes from the tribe of Dan is because when we have in Revelation 7 that it mentioned, we have the 144,000 sealed, and it does not mention the tribe of Dan amongst them, because it says, "And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. Of the tribe of Judah were sealed 12,000. Of Reuben sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Gad were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Asher were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Naphtali were sealed 12,000. The tribe of Manasseh were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Simeon were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Levi were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Issachar 12,000 were sealed. And of the tribe of Zebulun were 12,000 sealed. Of the tribe of Joseph were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Benjamin were sealed 12,000. And so Dan is not mentioned. And the tribe of Dan was what led the 10 northern tribes to start worshiping a golden calf image and worshiping false gods when the kingdom was divided, and Judah and Benjamin stayed in Jerusalem as the ruling class, the royal family of Judah. But the 10 northern tribes were led into idol worship by the tribe of Dan. And this is why they believe in the last days that the Antichrist will be from the tribe of Dan. Now, isn't that interesting that King Charles III became defender of all faiths and stopped saying that he would just be the defender of the faith, which is the gospel of Jesus Christ, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And then The silver was commissioned to hammer his hallmark in the cross of Christ. And so let me reiterate that he struck the cross of the Good Shepherd. We have the connection of King Charles III being connected to the royalty of the Greek Empire, where the leopard represented ancient Greece during Alexander the Great's reign. Now, even though he may not have any Greek blood in him, although Princess Alice might, I don't know, but she was the grandmother of King Charles III. But let me just tell this story again. Charles hand stamps King's mark on silver cross gifted to the church in Wales. The hallmarking took place at the Goldsmiths Center, where Charles met jewelry and silversmithing trainees and apprentices. Charles, during a visit to the Goldsmiths Center in London, the king has hand-stamped the king's mark on a cross, believed to be the first time a king has done so in British history. He's the last ruling king, and the first time the king's mark is put upon the cross of the true King of Kings that he will sit in place of when Israel accepts him as the anointed one. Shocking. So I'm putting all these pieces together in my mind and telling you these things. The silver processional cross, hallmarked by Charles, was commissioned by the Goldsmiths Company on behalf of the former Prince of Wales and is a gift from the king to the church in Wales. It was created by silversmith and master craftsman Michael Lloyd using traditional silversmithing skills, which are being taught to the young people who met the king during the visit. Speaking at the hallmarking, Prime Warden of the Goldsmiths Company, Lord Bridges, said, "We believe, sir, that this is the first time that a king of this country has applied the king's mark in the country's history." Lord Bridges joked that he did not want to increase the pressure in any way as laughter rippled around the room. Charles was given the opportunity to try out the process in 2 practice runs before striking the mark onto the cross. He breathed a sigh of relief when told it was perfect, and then jokingly asked Mr. Lloyd if he had ruined it. The cross was created from silver sheet produced from recycled bullion provided by the Royal Mint at Lantrasant, and a shaft of Welsh windfall timber. The part of the hallmark Charles marked on the cross of Christ was the leopard's head, or king's mark, which is the town mark for London. All items sold within the UK with elements of gold, silver, platinum, or palladium are legally required to be hallmarked, regulated by the British Hallmarking Council. Hallmarking is one of the oldest forms of consumer protection in the UK, and the term comes from a mark being applied at Goldsmiths Hall. The Goldsmiths Center, which Charles visited, celebrating its 10th anniversary. It is an educational charity dedicated to improving skills and shaping the careers of jewelers, silversmiths, and people working in the precious metals industry. Charles was presented with a gold-plated pin designed to mark the center's decade and said, "I'm very touched." Well, there you go. So I'm putting this together because I knew about the Danes being descendants of Dan and Prince Philip's father being the Prince of Greece and Denmark. So there you have the connection of the leopard of Greece that represented the leopard in the book of Daniel, and it's also representing the tribe of Dan, which people have said, scholars have said, that the Antichrist would be in the tribe of Dan. Now, he claims to have a genealogy, or at least Queen Victoria believed that his genealogy goes back to the tribe of Judah in the lineage of King David. So these are all reasons why he would be accepted by Israel if they came under the Commonwealth and the king brokered the peace. I discovered that article that said that Palestine had considered coming under the Commonwealth of the king, and so has Israel. And they even have a group in Israel, of the Commonwealth of the UK, where they try to present ideas, you know, with the fact that Israel was founded upon the elements of the law based upon the British Empire ruling when Israel became a nation. The British Mandate is what they were under, so a lot of their laws could easily fall into the laws of the British monarchy. So these are a couple more things that should stun you that I'm piecing together by the power of the Holy Spirit. Thank God he's showing me these things. But I truly believe, because the king's mark is on the banknotes, his royal cipher is on the banknotes, his crown, his title, his name, and his number, that this could be the hallmark that is placed on people eventually as a symbol of their purity when he agrees to the approves of the red heifer ceremony that's supposed to purify the Jews worldwide of their impurity. The hallmarking is a stamp of the king to symbolize the purity of the gold and the silver, and anyone that would be under the king's rule, eventually they could have the hallmark is also done with a laser. So they could use a cold laser to implement the king's mark on the hand and the forehead, indicating that you've been purified and that you can buy and sell because you have the purity, while others will not be able to buy and sell. It all comes together, and this is truly astonishing, don't you think? Like, subscribe, and I pray that this ministry continues to move forward. God bless you. If you want to support this channel, it's paypal.me/KKROCOCO, and my donation address is Kimberly K. Ballard, P.O. Box 246, Niwot, Niwot, Colorado is CO 80544. And the Antichrist, remember, is in place of King Jesus. And since the Sanhedrin in Israel tried to put forward a bill to remove Jesus from all of Israel and his gospel message, and they didn't manage to put it through, but they will eventually, when they put this king on the throne above them and they see that it can benefit them, then it all falls into place. What are the odds of all these things? And these connections of Dan having the sign of the griffin and the lion and whatever else I said there. But that was definitely the dragon, the griffin, that was on the flag of Wales that Tim Cohen showed in his book at the investiture of Prince Charles, which he showed the Queen bestowing the crown on Charles as she faced the griffin, the dragon. Wow. This is something else. I hope you appreciate this, and God bless. I will see you in the next video.